The characters in the story are over 18 years old. It was early September, the height of summer. I was reading a book, sitting by the window in my parents' house. Sometimes I would lift my head and look out the window at the backyard, watching the green lawn and bushes baking under the unblinking sun. Summer will be over soon, and I will leave my parents' house for my final year of college. But for now, I could enjoy the last few days of my vacation. I was sitting in a large armchair, my legs dangling over the side, immersed in my book. My younger sister broke the afternoon silence. "Christopher," she said, "let's go to the lake." I turned over the page I was reading and looked up. Sarah, my sister, was standing over me, all blonde hair and long limbs. A wide smile and sparkling eyes lit up her pretty face. "What?" I asked. I had no idea what she was talking about. "The lake," she said. "Let's go to the lake. With a backpack. There's not much time left before we go to school. We haven't been there for many years." I stared at her in confusion for a few moments until I realized what she meant. My family has been hiking in the mountains every summer since I was a little kid. We visited many places along a variety of routes, but there was one place that I remember as my favorite. We walked there several times to Lake Baskin. It was a small lake, remote, rarely visited, and surrounded on three sides by many meters of granite walls. But we haven't been there for many years. Sarah and I haven't gone hiking with our parents since I went to college a few years earlier. I said excitedly. "It's kind of last minute, isn't it? We would have to get permission. I do not know if we have time to buy it. What are you thinking about? We're both leaving for college soon." "We have time," she said. "This weekend. I've already gone online and got permission. 2 days and 1 night on the lake this weekend. It's been years since we last went hiking, and you and I have never gone together. You're not doing anything. Be honest, you have time. Let's do this. Please." Sarah was right. We went hiking with our parents many times, but we never went alone. "You mean just the two of us?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I asked my mom. She and Dad are going to a wedding this weekend and won't be able to go, but we can do without them. It's going to be fun. We never gone backpacking before, just you and me." She was right about that. We always went hiking with the whole family. It would be strange to leave without Mom and Dad, but Sarah and I got along well, like brother and sister, and she could be a lot of fun. However, the suddenness of it was a test for me. My sister was a spontaneous person, constantly giving up everything she was doing to try something new. I was more circumspect. The idea of preparing for a backpacking trip in just a few days seemed daunting, but Sarah was right. I had nothing else to do. I was ready to go back to college and just stalled until I had to leave for the airport next week. "Okay, I think so," I said. "We'll do it." "Hooray!" Sarah exclaimed, putting her arm around my shoulders. My nose caught the pleasant fresh scent of her hair as she hugged me, and a strange feeling swept over me. I shrugged my shoulders. The next few days were full of activity as we prepared for the hike. Sarah was the initiator of this, but having a more disciplined and scrupulous character, I soon took it upon myself to prepare a checklist for the trip and made sure that we had everything we needed. We stopped at the nearest camping supply store and bought everything we needed, including food and fuel for the stove. We didn't have to buy too many things. We are lucky that we have well stocked up on equipment from previous trips. On the day of the hike, Sarah and I woke up before dawn. We finished packing, loaded everything into the family car which we borrowed from my parents, and left home for the mountains just before the sun appeared over the eastern horizon. 3 hours later, we reached the beginning of the trail. It didn't take us long to get out of the car, load our backpacks, and throw them over our shoulders. We were ready to go. A weather-beaten wooden sign marked the beginning of the trail, pointing the way to our destination. I held out my hand to show Sarah that she should go first, and we went. I immediately noticed how differently we were dressed. I was wearing standard camping gear, khaki shorts, a t-shirt, thick hiking boots, and a wide-brimmed brown hat. She looked like she was going to a yoga workout, not a camping trip, but I couldn't complain. She could have been my sister, but she looked good, really good. The trail began in a dense forest, and the air was saturated with the scent of coniferous trees. At first, the views were limited. Gradually, however, our path wound up the mountainside, changing direction from time to time until it came out from behind the trees and revealed a stunning alpine picture. Mountains rose around us like sharp granite spires. The stream flowed noisily down the slope of the trail. A few white clouds here and there dotted the otherwise perfectly blue sky. The path rose in uneven steps cut into the rock, and my breathing became ragged from the seemingly endless climb. The 35 kilograms backpack did not make the journey any easier. After a couple of hours of our hike, we stopped, took off our backpacks, and sat down on a wide, flat rock overlooking the deep valley from which we came out. We were looking at a small lake, the shores of which were dotted with green lies. The air was clean. "What do we have for lunch?" Sarah asked. I was wondering if Sarah was aware of the impression she was making. She was beautiful. There was no doubt about it. I caught myself admiring Sarah and looked away. I didn't think she noticed the way I was looking at her. She was looking in the other direction across the lake into the forest. I was wondering what she was thinking. She seemed lost in thought. I took out the lunch food from my backpack, salami and tortilla, some lettuce and cheese, and handed some to Sarah. We had lunch together, taking our time admiring the scenery and at first saying nothing. Finally, I broke the silence. "Are you looking forward to starting your second year of college?" I asked her. She didn't answer right away. "I don't know." Her answer surprised me. "Is something wrong?" She looked at me, obviously considering the question. She seemed to struggle with herself before answering. "Christopher, why are guys so bad?" I did not expect such an answer. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Has something happened?" "I'll tell you," she said, "but I don't want you to tell Mom and Dad." "Okay, of course, whatever you say," I said. "Something happened to me last semester," she said, "with a guy." My skin turned cold. Alarm bells rang in my head. "What do you mean something happened? What's the matter, Sarah?" She raised her hand. "It's all right now," she said. "I'm fine." "What happened?" I asked again. "There was a guy there," she said. "He was a high school student. We met through friends at a party. I liked him at first. He was cute and smart, and he was funny. He invited me to watch a movie at his house. I was uncomfortable, but I let him do it. I tried to politely push him away. I said something like, 'Wow, I'm not ready for this,' and then he changed. He said something like, 'I'll tell you when you're ready.' I said no several times, getting louder every time. I think I almost screamed. I was shocked to hear Sarah's story. I had no idea she'd been through this, and I felt terrible about her. 'What happened then?' I asked. He looked at me, and he had an expression on his face like it was full of hate. It was like he was a monster, and he asked, 'What's wrong with you?' I said, 'What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you?' I said no. He shook his head as if I'd said something stupid. I ran out. I ran back to my dorm and cried all night. 'Have you done anything about it?' I asked. 'Did you tell the police? Did you report him to the university?' 'No, I didn't do that. I've been thinking about it. I talked about it with some of my friends. They were great. They won't have anything to do with him. I haven't seen him since, but I didn't report him. I just wanted to forget about it.' 'You shouldn't get away with it,' I said. 'No, it shouldn't,' she said, 'but I didn't have the heart to report him. He would deny it. I had no proof. He is popular and loved by everyone. I just didn't want to go through all this.' 'I understand,' I said. 'I'm so sorry, Sarah. I had no idea.' You'd be surprised how common this is, Christopher. I hear it all the time from my friends. There are a lot of dumb guys in the world. They think they have the right to do so. I think you're right." She looked up from her feet at me, right in my face. "But not you." "Well, I've never done anything like that. That's for sure. Never. We're not all like that." "I know that," she said. "Sometimes it's hard to tell which one is good and which one is bad. I haven't dated since it happened. I'm still trying to trust again. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm really sorry." "I know," she said. "Thank you." We spent the rest of lunch in silence. I felt terribly sorry for my sister. We finished lunch, and after half an hour, got up and resumed our hike. The air became thinner, and the trees less frequent as we walked along the path winding higher into the mountains. I was in good shape, but I felt that as we climbed higher and higher, I was puffing harder. Most of the time, I let Sarah lead me. I tried to convince myself that I was being chivalrous, but the truth was that I enjoyed watching her. Finally, we came to the pass, a crevice in a high, jagged mountain range that marked the boundary between two wedges. Behind us lay a wide valley covered with a green blanket of fir trees. A vast alpine basin spread out in front of us, framed by even more mountain ranges stretching into the distance. The basin was mostly rocky and barren, but here and there it was dotted with small groves of trees. Our destination, Lake Baskin, was partially open, partially hidden behind a ridge in a low-lying part of the basin to our left. It was as breathtaking a view as I remembered it, and what's the best part? There wasn't a soul around us. After Labor Day, the crowd thinned out, and we were lucky. The whole wilderness was at our disposal. Sarah let out a high-pitched scream, and it echoed down the mountain, finally fading until we heard nothing but the rustle of a light breeze over the rocks and the faint cry of an invisible bird nearby. "That's great, isn't it?" Sarah asked, looking straight ahead. "I'll never get tired of this view," I replied. I caught myself and looked at her face before she turned around and looked at me. Then we both turned forward. "I think there are about a couple of kilometers left," I said. "If we hurry up, we can swim in the lake before dinner." "Come on," Sarah said, and we went. The whole way to the lake went downhill, so we walked faster, although the steep path was heavy for our feet. The accumulated weight of my body and backpack pressed down on my knees with every step down the mountain path. The winding path wound between dense thickets of fir trees. The smell of their resin hit my nostrils. Sarah continued to walk ahead of me, setting a fast pace. I could feel her impatience to get to her destination. A few more bends of the path, the trees parted, and here it is, Lake Baskin, sparkling like a sapphire against the backdrop of harsh mountains. I'd forgotten how beautiful it was. The rocky cliffs that framed it towered above us, incredibly high and sheer. Patches of snowfields here, and there clung to the steep spurs of the surrounding peaks. To the right, a waterfall formed by melted snow cascaded dozens of meters down a sheer cliff. Stunted, twisted trees clung to the inaccessible mountain slopes wherever they could. We conducted a reconnaissance in search of a place to camp. It didn't take us long to find the perfect place. A flat space surrounded by rocks and trees with a gentle descent to the edge of the lake about 30 m away from us. Sarah and I dropped our backpacks on the ground, relieved to be free of their weight. Sarah galloped forward to the lake, 10 m or so. She spread her arms wide in the direction of the lake, shining blue under the sun, and then turned back to me, still holding her arms high above her. "It's amazing," she said. It was amazing, breathtaking, majestic, too much to put into words or a photograph. And my sister, standing in the middle of it all, looked like the cherry on the cake. I felt sick at the thought as soon as I thought about it. "I have to pull myself together," I said to myself. "This whole lake, this whole wilderness is at our disposal." "Christopher," she said, waving her hand around the stage. "There's no one here. I can't believe it." Sarah was right. It was strange to feel so isolated. In previous years, when my parents and I came to the lake before Labor Day, we met other tourists on the trail and shared the lake with other tourist groups. But not this year. We hadn't seen anyone on the trail in the last few hours, and it was clear that we were the only ones on the lake. I looked up at the sky at the position of the sun. It was only the middle of the day, but sunset should have come early because of the granite mountain wall that blocked the horizon to the west. As soon as the sun goes down behind the mountain range, the temperature will drop quickly. "Let's go for a swim," Sarah asked. "I think we should set up camp first," I said. "Come on," she said. "I want to swim." "We have plenty of time to set up camp." "Well, go on. At least I'm going to set up a tent and a stove. I'll join you in a minute." I unloaded my backpack, focusing on the things I would need to set up our camp: tent, bedding, stove, expanding water jugs. She spread her arms out to the sides. "Isn't it amazing?" she exclaimed. She pirouetted and turned to face the lake. "Hello!" she shouted joyfully away from me towards the lake, the trees, and the mountains around us. A faint echo answered her. She turned back to me. "I think we're all alone here, Christopher." I nodded. "I think so, and it will probably stay that way. It's getting late, and it's unlikely that more people will come to us today. The lake will be at our disposal." That was fine with me. "I'm going swimming," Sarah said. "Finish your camp chores and join me." I watched her as she jumped over the rocky ground to the water's edge and waded into the lake. It didn't take me long to finish setting up the camp. I built a simple two-person tent in the form of a dome and laid out a camping stove nearby. The lake was still sunny and warm, but the sun had already moved far enough on its way to the west, and I knew that sunset was just around the corner. If I was going to swim, it would be now or never. After finishing my business, I walked barefoot to the lake. Pine needles and rocks pricked my feet, and I jumped until I reached the edge of the lake. I stepped inside. The water was cold, as I expected at this altitude, but the air was still warm. and I went further into the water until I was finally ready and sank my whole body under its surface. It's cold, I shouted when I surfaced and saw Sarah 7 away from me. What is it? She asked when I got up. It takes a little getting used to, I said, but yes. I looked around. This is an amazing place. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, Sarah said. Let's swim there, she said, to that rock. Her finger pointed to a large rock that was in the lake about 70 away from us. Race with you, I said. I'm in, she replied. And together we dived and swam to see who would get to the rock first. I was a good swimmer and I was bigger and stronger than Sarah, but I knew she was a good athlete, and I knew she would try to beat me, so I swam with fast, wide strokes through the cold waters of the lake. The cold squeezed my chest and made it difficult to breathe, so I had to concentrate from time to time. I lifted my head above the surface to see where Sarah was. She was close. She wanted to beat me. At first, I barely touched the stone for a moment. We both clung to him, breathing heavily. Then we pulled ourselves up a slope covered with moss. After a few minutes of climbing, Sarah and I found ourselves at the top of a cliff, a tiny island in the middle of a precious lake surrounded by the most beautiful mountain scenery I have ever seen. When I finished looking around, I turned to Sarah. It's perfect, I said. I'm glad you suggested this trip. Always listen to your sister, she said. She pointed to a flat area on the western side of the cliff. Let's catch some heat while it's still sunny. I was amazed at our isolation. Here we were, lying in the sun in a picturesque mountain amphitheater, and as far as I knew, there was not a single living soul within a radius of several kilometers from us. We're all alone here, I said. Just us. I know, Sarah said and turned to me. I feel like I'm in another world. It's just the two of us here. No one can tell us what to do here. Summer is almost over, she said. That's right, I said. I don't want this to end, Sarah said. I would like to stop this moment, and you and I could lie on this stone for a little longer. I wish we had done it earlier, at the beginning of the summer and longer. I feel so happy right now. I do not know how I will feel when I return to school. To tell the truth, I like school. I was looking forward to coming back, but I had to admit that there was nothing like what I felt at that moment in the sun with Sarah on the rock, and I didn't want it to end either. In the mountains, the seasons change with brutal suddenness. In less than a few weeks, the warmth that Sarah and I enjoyed at that moment on the lake will disappear. A shroud of cold would have descended over the water. Snow is likely to fall before the end of the month. Sarah and I would have been far from the lake by then. We would go back to our colleges 1,000 km from the lake and from each other. Lying on a rock next to Sarah, I was acutely and desperately aware of the transience of this moment. We sat quietly on a rock and enjoyed the warm, friendly rays of the sun for a while. Do you like what you see? Sarah looked at me, grinning. I'm sorry, I said, embarrassed. It's all right, she said and lifted herself off the cliff a few centimeters, leaning on her elbows. I don't mind. It feels like we are 1,000,000 kilometers away from everything and everyone. A strange feeling came over me when she said that. And what rules apply here? I asked. She sat up a little more. I tried not to do it, but I couldn't help myself. I do not know, she said after a long pause. Maybe there are no rules. Maybe we can make them whatever we want. Wouldn't that be great? I hope you don't mind, she said. There's not much summer left, and I want to get rid of these tan streaks if I can. I looked away from her. You don't have to look away, Sarah said. I don't mind if you take a look. I turned back to her. You look good, Christopher. Thanks, I said. I practice a little and swim. We lay on the rock for a while longer, and it seemed to me that I was in a dream. Indeed, it seemed that Sarah and I had escaped beyond the boundaries of the earth and existed for a while in our own world. We enjoyed the quiet, warm air over the lake like a mirror. It reflected the mountains towering around it. I closed my eyes. Although I couldn't see Sarah, I could hear her breathing and feel her presence. A slight chill tickled my skin, and I opened my eyes. A light breeze rose, and the surface of the lake rippled slightly. I looked up and saw that the sun was already approaching the mountain horizon. Finally, I broke the silence. We better swim back, I said. It's going to be sunset soon. Yes, it's better that way, she said. We dived off the cliff into the water and swam to shore, but this time we didn't race. We were walking. We were in no hurry. Sarah was the first to get ashore. We came out from behind the bushes and approached the camp at the same time. Sarah looked around and nodded. Great job, big brother, she said. It looks like a good camp. I'm glad to see that you care about us. What else are older brothers for? I asked. Just for that, she asked in response. We stared at each other for a moment. So, what's for dinner? What is it? She asked in response. Beef stew, I said. But first, I want to make a fire and make a bonfire. There seems to be a lot of wood around. Can you collect some while I cook? Of course, she replied. Sarah gathered dry branches all over the camp and piled them in a pile next to me while I collected the stove, fuel, supplies, and food. The stew was ready at about the same time as the sun disappeared behind the granite wall in the west. The air was noticeably colder, but the fire we lit kept the cold at bay for a while. I poured the stew into our plastic bowls, and we both gobbled it down, glad to be able to fill our empty stomachs with hot food after a long, tiring day of hiking. Good food, Sarah said. Thanks, I said. Cooking is one of my many talents. I didn't know that, Sarah said. I need to know more about your many talents. I don't share them with everyone, I said. I understand, Sarah smiled at me, and a drop of stew rolled down her chin. Will you share them with me if I behave myself? Maybe, I said, if you're nice enough. We finished the stew, and when it got dark, I lit a fire, and we cooked marshmallows on the ends of long sticks and mashed it together with chocolate and crackers. By the time we were done, stars began to appear in the indigo sky above us, and the air became cooler. Nice dinner, Christopher, Sarah said. You cook better than me. Thanks, I said. However, we are not quite finished yet. No, but we need to get ourselves in order before the next stage. We rinsed and cleaned the kitchen utensils. I didn't want the bears to come to us at night for leftovers. When we were done, we returned to the campfire. I rummaged in my backpack. I took out a flask, lime, and a small plastic salt shaker. It's time for a tequila drink, I said. Tequila? I'm impressed, Sarah said. Be ready, I said. But you've never been a Boy Scout, have you? Sarah asked. I shrugged my shoulders. No, but I've learned the most important parts. Being ready means having tequila on hand when you need it. I picked up the flask and waved it between us. I placed the salt shaker on a flat stone slab in front of me and sliced the lime into thin slices with a Swiss Army knife that I keep nearby. I carefully poured the tequila in appropriate portions into small aluminum cups. Have you ever tried tequila? I asked Sarah. One day, she said, in Cabo on spring break with friends. But it was somehow different. Yes? I asked. Oh yes, tell me about it. There were 6 of us, she said, on the beach. It's late at night on a big blanket. 3 guys, 3 girls. This guy Jake brought tequila, some limes, and salt. So what's on your mind? Sarah asked. Something a little different, I said, and saw Sarah's eyebrows arch as I said it. My mind conjured up something I hadn't planned before, but Sarah's story inspired me to come up with a new plan. I do not know what came over me. I came up with it in an instant, but I wanted something, and something told me that Sarah wanted it too. Lie on your back, I said. Sarah laid down on her back. The rock she was sitting on was large, smooth, and mostly flat, so it was easy for her to lie on her back. Sarah followed my instructions. Her eyes never left mine. They stared into my eyes with a mixture of trust and curiosity and something else I couldn't name. I took the lime out of the plastic bag and cut a thin slice from it. I held the slice between the 2 of us. Don't move, I said. Okay, she said, and her voice was barely audible, muffled by a slice of lime. I didn't understand what I was doing. I've never done this before. Of all people, I never imagined that I would do this to my sister. Our eyes met after I put the cup down on the table. Her eyes glittered in the moonlight, and she nodded her head when I finished. I took my head off her and looked at her face. I wonder what I had done. It was my little sister, but the look on her face told me that she was just as impatient as I was. Neither of us said anything for another minute. Then a vicious grin spread across her face. My turn, she said. Sarah got up from the cliff and pushed me onto it. Let's go wash up, Sarah said. Her hand pointed vaguely in the direction of the lake. Sarah, it's nighttime. We're going to freeze. No, we won't do that. We'll wash up and then get warm. Where are the towels? In my backpack, I said. Wait a second. I got up and went in my backpack. I rummaged in my backpack and pulled out 2 hand towels. They were hardly good enough to wipe us off if we went swimming in the lake, but I brought them back to where Sarah was sitting. Anyway, come on, she said. We grabbed our towels and clumsily ran towards the lake, dodging rocks and thorny plants wherever we could, shouting, "Oh, that night when we failed," and the ground under our feet pricked our feet. Finally, we went to the shore of the lake and shivered. During the day, the water looked inviting, but now at night, it seemed cold and inaccessible. I wanted to go back to the tent, but I needed to wash off the tequila. Sarah and I looked at each other and nodded at the same time. We dived into the lake together. Then I jumped out of the lake, trembling all over. It was night in the mountains, and the temperature was plummeting. Sarah came out of the lake at the same time as me, like Venus. "Christopher," she began to speak. "Don't say anything," I said. "I need you now." She was silent for a moment, but the words that followed pierced the cold, quiet night sky. Finally, she pulled away. "It's getting cold," she said. "We better get into the tent." "Okay, let's go," I said. I trembled, and my teeth chattered. The sky above was black, but the blackness was dotted with millions of stars. Sarah and I ran up to the tent and dived into it, zipping up behind us. I've already made sure the sleeping bags are ready. The night temperature was dropping rapidly, and our teeth were chattering. I zipped both sleeping bags together, and Sarah and I climbed into the connected bags one by one. Time passed, and consciousness faded after a while. I do not know when exactly Sarah's quiet voice cut through the night. "Christopher." "Yes. I don't want to stop doing this. Tell me we keep doing this always." I've always been a light sleeper, so it wasn't a surprise to me when I woke up, but didn't see anything. It was still dark. I came to my senses and realized where and when I was. I picked up my watch from the floor of the tent. It said 4:47 a.m. I didn't sleep, but I had enough time to leave before sunrise, and Sarah was fast asleep and would probably sleep that way for a while. I didn't want to wake her up. I felt uneasy, but I wanted her to keep sleeping, so I got out of the connected sleeping bags and clumsily climbed out of the tent. The cold morning air hit my skin. I rode to the lake to see better and keep warm, but it was hard to think about the lake or the temperature. I thought about Sarah and what we had done. My sister Sarah and I made love, and it was the best thing I've ever seen or felt in my life. The lake was a silent witness to my feelings, its waters changing color from green to gray-blue as the sky brightened. For a few moments, the wind had completely died down, and the lake lay like glass under and between its mountain frame. The only sound was the steady music of the waterfall constantly flowing down the slope on the other side of the lake. I do not know how long I've been looking at the lake like this. "Good morning." I heard a voice behind me. I turned around and saw Sarah. She hopped next to my piece of land until she stopped a meter away from me, and we stared at each other. I think we both had half joyful, half stunned expressions on our faces. "Good morning," I said to break the long silence. The rest of the morning passed like a hazy dream. Sarah made coffee, and I made breakfast. We said a few words to each other, and then after finishing our meal, we dismantled the tent, dressed, and prepared backpacks to set off on our way back. By 10 a.m., we were ready to go, and there was nothing left for us to do but put our backpacks on our backs. When Sarah spoke, "Christopher, I want to talk about this. About what happened." "All right," I said. "I don't want this to stop," she said. "Me too," I said. "I'm serious," she said. "I don't know exactly what it is. We can't get married." "I know, and I will. I know that. But I don't want this to stop. I don't want to fix it. It will always be a part of us. That's how I want it to be." "Let's make a promise," Sarah said. "Right now. No matter what happens in the future. No matter what happens in our lives. No matter who we meet. No matter who we fall in love with or marry someday. I do not know when, where, or how. We will do it again." I don't remember the way back very well. Finally, we returned to the beginning of the trail to the car and drove back home. We didn't talk much and didn't say anything about what happened at Lake Baskin. It's been 7 days since Sarah and I returned from the lake. I'm looking out the window for my seat on the plane. He's about to taxi onto the runway. The plane will take me 1,000 kilometers from home. I will start my senior year in college. All I can think about is my sister Sarah. We swore allegiance to each other, and yet I do not know when I will see her again. She left home for college yesterday, but I see her as if she's right next to me. I do not know how or when this will happen, but I know with every cell of my body that one day Sarah and I will go to the lake again. High in the mountains, far from everyone and everything else, to become one. Now and forever.